So hello and welcome to Hanna and Eastwood, the podcast, episode 1, the pilot. So what you can expect from this podcast is comedy, humour, and plenty of it. Discussions. We're going to choose some songs each week, and then we're going to have a debate or a hot question. Now, you obviously know who I am. I am Sam Hanna, the man, the myth, the legend. But if you're new to this, you may be wondering who the handsome guy next to me is. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, my name's Harry Eastwood. I'm also a living legend. Yeah, it's good to be here. This is a complete trial. It's a new thing for the both of us. It could be you can make your own minds up on this, but it may be that we've descended into madness as a result of lockdown, that we've decided that this is a good idea. But as I say, we'll see how it goes, and you can make your minds up. But yes, back to Sam.
And would you like to share some of your humour with us?
Well, that kind of was the best that I can do. I tend to feed off the situation, so we'll see what happens.
And of course, this is the first time that people would have seen us together for 2 or 3 years. So this is our gift to the world.
So I am still alive, just so you're reassured. Coronavirus hasn't got me yet.
So our discussion for this week is Black Lives Matter protests, and riots and the vandalism. What are your views on that?
Well, obviously we've all seen the video of George Floyd, and I think all of us were horrified by it. And it's sort of been a wake-up call for everyone, I think. And I'm completely behind the message of the protests, and I think it's right that people should be protesting, because it's wrong in the 21st century, with how developed as a civilization has become, that we've still got such embedded racial issues. So I think the message is very important. However, I do think, and I know people have very conflicting opinions on this, but I think the way that some people are choosing to carry these protests out is wrong. I think violence doesn't help. It doesn't help the cause at all, particularly the forms of violence that we've seen and the vandalism. I mean, particularly the vandalism of the cenotaph is hugely disrespectful, and disgraceful, to be honest. And it's just, there's plenty of other means of showing your support for Black Lives Matter than vandalising a war memorial. And also, I think the Winston Churchill thing, this is again a bit of a controversial topic, because there's no doubt that he said a lot of racially inflammatory things, but at the end of the day, he did save the world and the country from Hitler, one of the worst racists we've ever seen.
And of course, the people that are calling him racist were on VE Day declaring him a hero of our time.
It is hypocrisy.
Which makes him a bit of a hypocrite.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Yeah, I mean, it's hypocritical, to be honest, that he saved us from arguably the worst racists the world has ever seen. And we wouldn't have, the fact of the matter is, we wouldn't have the freedom of speech that we now have if it hadn't have been for Churchill. Just imagine what would have happened if Hitler had won the war, how different times would have been. So I think, you know, there are obviously he said some racially inflammatory things, but you know, he was unfortunately he was from the era where it was a very common thing, and that's what they were brought up on. So they didn't really know any better at that point. So I think that was completely wrong. However, the statue in Bristol, I think, shouldn't have been there at all in the first place.
I was just going to come on. I was just
day.
going to come on to that. I was just going to come on to that.
I mean, you can, yeah.
Obviously, the statue of Colston in Bristol. We were talking earlier this week, and I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it being there. Full stop. I don't agree, and I'm sure you said the same. You don't agree with the way that it was pulled down, and the way that it was rolled through the street and chucked into the river. I think it should have been taken down naturally and put into a museum of some sort to show this is what happened back then, but this is what happened now. You can't just eradicate the pieces of history that you don't like.
Exactly. And we need to learn from history. We can't just get rid of it and forget that it's happened, because we need that history. We need to know about that history to inform us about the future and how we can change our way of life, and educate people, really. So yeah, I agree. I think it should be put in a museum if they can. Have they pulled it out yet, out of the river, or not?
I saw on the news this morning they pulled it out in the early hours of the morning, so that there wasn't much fuss about them pulling it out, and it's going into storage, and I believe it will be put into a museum.
I mean, I think that's essential for the whole Black Lives Matter campaign. It should. And
I believe they're also putting messages from the Black Lives Matter campaign with it, so that this part of its history can be shown alongside that part of Colston's history, which obviously I don't agree with. I don't agree with him getting a statue for being a slave trader.
But then also, there's Colston Hall. There's a lot of things named after Colston, so it'll be interesting to see whether they feel it's appropriate to change the name of Colston Hall and things like that, because that's another commemoration.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot of buildings named after Colston are looking at changing their names. But again, is that eradicating part of the history?
Well, obviously, it's a big part of the history of Bristol, and he made a lot of money for Bristol. Unfortunately, it was by slave trading, but that's how he made the money, which is terrible. But you know, it's part of Bristol's history and why Bristol is what it is today, basically.
And finally, before we move on, do you think the protests and the violence and the riots have gone too far?
The honest answer, yes. But it is only a minority that are causing the problems. But that sometimes is enough. And you've seen the reaction of the government to the protest. They said that all of those who were responsible for pulling down the statue should be brought to justice. And that's not the message that they were looking for. And I watched the news the other night, and it was solely focused on the vandalism, and all of the violence, basically. And it was completely detracting from what they're trying to achieve, I thought. That's my view.
Yeah, I completely agree. I part of me agrees. I agree completely with the message, and I have lots of black friends who I am in support of. When sharing anything with Black Lives Matter, I feel that if I didn't share my support in that time, I think that would put friendships in jeopardy, and that would probably make people see me in a completely different light and see me as a person that I'm not. Um, I do feel, looking at the protests in Plymouth that happened over the weekend, that, as you said, the violence and the riots that are following after the protests are going way too far. Some of the protests are completely peaceful and non-harmful, but I think there are a small minority trying to cause mayhem when mayhem doesn't need to be caused. There's one simple message. Why ruin? Why destroy that message with violence?
Yeah, and one of the I was having a discussion with some of my uni friends about this, and they were talking about. We ended up talking about the environmental eco protests that happened last year, and they were a lot less violent. I mean, you didn't see half of the violence that's going on now. And yes, perhaps they haven't achieved as much as we'd want them to, but they've certainly got people talking about it. There's definitely a lot more discussions occurring about climate change. And the reason for that is that their message didn't get wiped away by unnecessary violence. They definitely caused disruption, there's no question of that, because there was a lot of disruption on the tube trains and stuff like that. So there was disruption, but it wasn't half as bad as this. And I think overall, they did start a movement towards the importance of climate change and tackling it.
So moving on quite nicely into our weekly segment, songs for the week. This week we have both chosen songs which we feel represent the trying times that we are in. So Harry, would you like to go first? And
so the song that I have selected, it's a song that I really like anyway. It's "We Didn't Start the Fire" by Billy Joel, and I think really the lyrics in the chorus, "We didn't start the fire, it was always burning since the world's been turning," is very representative of what's been happening, because obviously racism has been happening for a very long time, and it's still happening now. And I think, as I said earlier, it's the 21st century, and there isn't really an excuse for such issues.
no, not at all.
So yeah, it's a great song. It's quite an uplifting song, and if you know all of the lyrics, you deserve a medal, because it's a bit of a tongue twister. But yeah, it's a very good song. So what's your song of the week?
My song of the week is a song called "We Shall Be Free" by Garth Brooks. And I was introduced to this song as a child, because as a child I was a Muppet maniac, you could say.
You still are now, but
yeah, I'm still a Muppet, but not a maniac. But Garth Brooks was a special guest on one of their shows, and he sang this song with the Muppet chorus. And what I will do is I will share both of these songs. Obviously, we can't play them now due to copyright issues. But I will, when this is live, we will post both links so that everybody can have a listen. And it shares a simple message: we shall be free. And the lyrics are just poignant, I feel. When the last child cries for a crust of bread, when the last man dies for the word that he said, when there's shelter over every head, we shall be free. When we're free to love anyone we choose, when the last thing we look for is colour of skin and the first thing we look for is beauty within. And I feel that that is the message that this is the song that should be sung.
Blare the song out. Forget all the violence.
This is the song that should be sung at the protests, because there are lots of things that we could be protesting for, and there are lots of things that are coming to light that people are taking a disagreement with, and we will talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But it has such a clear message, and hearing that as a child, it affects your childhood because it makes you think differently. As a child, I have a granddad who is very old-fashioned. For example, he voted to leave the European Union, clearly for racist reasons. And I feel that if I had taken him as a role model, that would have changed my life dramatically. I wouldn't be the person that I am today. So hearing that song, just getting that education, because it is an important message. Is really important.
Yeah, I completely agree. Just get a huge PA system in all of the cities and blast it out. Far more effective. To be honest, a song is a very powerful medium for conveying a message, because people obviously gravitate towards music and will listen to the lyrics, and I think are far more likely to, learn something and feel some empathy from a song than people rioting and vandalizing statues. There was another statue today, Baden-Powell. Did you hear about that?
I think I did,
the
yes.
Scout. Yeah. And again, that he obviously did some racially inflammatory things, but again, there's an argument that he did a lot of good things. So it's another controversial figure. But at least
that statue wasn't ripped down and thrown into the sea.
No.
And I was watching Good Morning Britain this morning, and they had an interview there, and there was a fairly large gathering to see the statue. But the guy who was being interviewed said that every one of the people that was there didn't want the statue to be taken down for that reason. Being, you, like I said before, you can't eradicate bits of history that you don't like, because there may be bits of history that you agree with that someone else doesn't agree with, and they cancel it out, and you're left with nothing, and you don't learn anything by eradicating bits of history that you don't like.
And what really matters is the future. The past is the past. We can't change what happened in the past. I know that's what people are trying to do, but you can't. The past is fixed. We can learn things from the past, and I think we are learning things. But what matters is the now and the future. So I think this focus on the past and all of these figures is educational in some ways and does help the cause, but all of the vandalism just creates division, because there's a lot of people that that admire these figures. So it's just creating more division.
And moving on to our hot question or our debate, us being the musical comedian superstars that we are, I'm sure we both have opinions on this question, being, does comedy have a place in the 21st century? And that means in such a sensitive generation, because we do live in a very sensitive generation where people will look for things to find offence, rather than for entertainment, and people find offence for entertainment now. So does comedy have a place in the 21st century?
It is a very interesting debate. Yeah, it's a difficult question. I mean, I think, to be honest, the last thing we need at the moment is to lose comedy, if you know what I mean, because this may be different for other people and you, but I think you're the same as me here. But comedy has really helped me get through the lockdown. I mean, all of the memes that have been generated out of various things that have been happening over lockdown, it's just lightened the mood. It's just been funny, and it's been good to share those funny things with other people. So yeah, I think it is bad. It's a bad thing to lose comedy. And
a world without comedy is a very sad and serious world.
It's already sad enough.
I think comedy, small injections of comedy, like sitting down and watching Gold on the telly, watching an episode of Only Fools and Horses or Mrs. Brown's Boys,
it just makes you forget about all of the bad things.
If you're having a bit of a rubbish day, and the last thing you want to do is watch the news and see how many people are dying from coronavirus, or seeing the protests, the riots and the vandalism, because that will just make it worse. So comedy deserves a place. It deserves a little throne, and a little placard saying "Do not remove."
So what are your obviously some programs have been pulled from streaming, so like Little Britain, naming one. So what are your opinions on this?
Come Fly With Me, and yesterday the League of Gentlemen was pulled. Now I can think of multiple reasons why Little Britain and Come Fly With Me were pulled. And Matt Lucas openly said in 2017 that if he was making Little Britain today, he wouldn't put half of the jokes in. For example, the transvestite joke. And when they did Little Britain in lockdown, they did the transvestite joke, but he said we shouldn't be making this joke today, or something, which can be seen as humorous.
Yeah.
But it is his opinion. There's no place for mocking transvestites or doing a blackface. I remember the first episode of Little Britain. It ended with David Walliams dressed up as a black and white minstrel. So he was fully embracing blackface while eating a bowl of cereal, listening to the minstrel show. I'm watching it now. Well, watching it when I first watched it, I didn't find it very funny.
Yeah.
Because it's not funny to see people dress up in blackface or pretend to do a dodgy accent, because it's not funny. Whereas the League of Gentlemen, I don't agree with it being removed. and it was only removed from Netflix, I believe. So it's still on BBC iPlayer and it's still on BritBox. Whereas Little Britain and Come Fly With Me.
So you think it was right that they were taken down?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
They don't deserve. They're not willing of a place.
They're not up to date enough, are they? I think.
No.
Is the main issue. I mean, they were funny at the time, but when you look back now, knowing what we know, it was offensive. So.
Whereas the League of Gentlemen was never meant to be offensive. I believe it's a black comedy. Not black comedy meaning a dark comedy. Just in case anyone doesn't know. And the one character that got it removed from Netflix is a character called Papa Lazarou, who has a pitch black face with white circles around his eyes and a white circle around his mouth, sort of like a gollywog doll, which I can see why that can be seen as offensive, because obviously the gollywog dolls were seen as highly racist dolls, and they were obviously stopped from being made, so they're not made anymore.
Yeah.
But one of the creators of Papa Lazarou said that him being the ringleader of a circus, he was meant to look like an inverted clown, and I can see that when he says he's supposed to look like an inverted clown. You look at a picture of Papa Lazarou and you think, I can see that. And the voice behind Papa Lazarou, the gristled, horrible voice, kind of terrifying voice, was actually based off of his landlord, who was English, who was a white English person. And that's not to mean any disrespect. But when people take offence and say that it's a racist character, they would be wrong, because the creator has openly said this is what he is, this is what he's supposed to be. Please don't take offence. Obviously, the League of Gentlemen Return did a 20-year anniversary mini-series, and at the end of that mini-series, Papa Lazarou did make a return, and I was surprised that he did make a return, just because we are in a sensitive generation, and I do think the League of Gentlemen would have sat down while writing and said what characters are appropriate to bring back, what characters aren't appropriate to bring back. And I was just surprised that they thought, okay, he only made a 5-second appearance. His catchphrase is "You're my wife now," and he came into a mine and said, "This is a wife mine now," and walked away again. And I was shocked, to say the least, that he made an appearance. But I can't see any offence. I can't see any offence in it. So I think they were wrong, basically. I think they were wrong to remove it from Netflix. Whether its contract was running up and they thought, because of Little Britain and Come Fly With Me, we'll scrap it. We'll scrap it now to save any arguments or uproar. But I think if they had looked into it a little bit more, they would have seen it for what it really is.
Yeah.
And the question is, why have Netflix removed it, but not BBC iPlayer or BritBox? Whereas as soon as Little Britain and Come Fly With Me was taken off of Netflix. They were taken off of
iPlayer as
the
well.
other.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, you can take them off of streaming services, but you cannot stop. At the moment, you cannot stop DVDs. You
And they'll
cannot
be on
stop
YouTube.
DVDs.
There'll be clips on YouTube.
There will always be
It's
clips on
impossible.
YouTube.
It's impossible to eradicate it. And these shows were very popular. There's no denying it, and had a lot of fans. And so there will be people that have posted countless clips and maybe even full episodes on YouTube. So it's impossible to eradicate all of it. But I think it shows a good message from Netflix and BBC iPlayer that they deem Little Britain, for example, as inappropriate.
Yeah, yeah. And especially, I mean, if Matt Lucas made the statement that it's not right in this day and age, why did Netflix? Why is it only just now that Netflix and BBC iPlayer and BritBox have taken it down?
It's a very good question.
And then, of course, BBC commissioned a special called Little Brexit.
And also, in the big night in, I think they did a
they did
sketch.
Little Britain in lockdown.
Yeah.
And if he openly made that statement in 2017, why are the BBC still allowing commissions to be made of a program that isn't appropriate?
Yeah, and it's taken them all of these years to realise that they're inappropriate, which is interesting, and just shows actually the power behind Black Lives Matter, and that in some cases, you know, they are creating a message. But my concern, obviously, is that they're going to undermine that message by the individuals who are causing the violence.
Now, as we are musical comedians, it wouldn't be right not to talk about comedy in music. And there are lots of musical comedians out there. There are Tom Lehrer, Tim Minchin, Fascinating Aida, Dilly Keane, just to name a few. And we both actively looked at songs which might be deemed as offensive, not necessarily just for the Black Lives Matter, some that people might see as transphobic, or homophobic, or might seem offensive to race or religion, or there might just be inappropriate jokes that some people don't see the humour that everybody else does. So I think the first few that we will talk about are the songs by both Fascinating Aida and Tim Minchin, in regards to cancer. Now, obviously, Big C, which is one of Fascinating Aida's more recent songs, was commissioned after Adele had cancer herself. So I can see the reason behind that. But Tim Minchin singing a song about a toxic relationship and saying that you grew on me like a tumor, and that's not the only cancer joke that he makes. He goes on to sing about various different types of cancer, and obviously Radiating Love. It only mentions it once, but I'm very much aware that Dilly Keane, who is the founder of Fascinating Aida, has had and still has various complaints when people see Radiating Love on the set list. And when I interviewed her in 2017, she explained her reasoning for mentioning cancer in that song. And for those who don't know the song, the lyric is, "When I'm sprouting a cancerous growth on my face." Now, Radiating Love isn't meant to be seen as a funny love song. It's sort of the aftermath of the bomb. And I am very much aware that Dilly did an unlimited amount of research into the aftermath of the bomb, especially Chernobyl. And she said people were getting cancers and growths all over their bodies. So it felt appropriate to put it in that song.
It wasn't meant as a joke. It was just a fact.
But again, like with Little Britain and Come Fly With Me and The League of Gentlemen, Big C and Radiating Love are based on fact. Whereas You Grew On Me Like a Tumour is only there for comical effect. And he played a big stadium tour, big stadium show in the Royal Albert Hall with the Philharmonic Orchestra or something. And when he sang "You Grew on Me Like a Tumour," it got a huge roar of laughter. But if you look at it now, will it have the same effect, or will there be gasps?
It's interesting, isn't it?
And do you feel he should still be singing that?
Probably not, to be honest. Probably not. But I think my argument for most of these musical comedians is they built up a certain reputation over the years. And so when they sing songs about controversial topics, and sort of push the boundary a little bit, that's what you learn to expect from them. And so if you go to see a performance, or if you choose to watch a video on YouTube or whatever, you know what you're in for. So it's a conscious decision. It's unlike, again, the statues. The statues are unmoved and for everyone to see. If you are going to be offended by something like a particular song by a musical comedian, you can make the conscious decision not to watch it. You know, it's the same with TV programs, really. You can choose not to watch it if you find it offensive.
And that moves on to the song "Taboo" by Fascinating Aida. Now I know that that's a firm favourite with both of us, and they introduce it by saying there are lots of other song subjects we wouldn't sing about. And it's a very comical song, and because they say this is a song made up of songs that we wouldn't sing about, they get away with it. But I feel there is a line. There is still a line, and it's a very fine line about what is appropriate and what isn't. I mean, the last time they sang "Taboo," Dilly, with a wry smile on her face, sang "Asking Oscar Pistorius, do you miss your feet?" With a coy smile, and you heard the whole audience gasp with shock, as if to say, did she just say that? And in 2004, they played America, and they, rather than saying "Oscar Pistorius, do you miss your feet?", they sang "Asking Osama bin Laden, where have you been?" Now that can be seen funny to some people, but especially in America, where I think some people would have still been mourning the Twin Tower incident, making a joke about Al Qaeda and singing asking Osama bin Laden, where have you been? I think that just surpasses the fine line. And the whole Oscar Pistorius line came after he shot his wife or his girlfriend on Valentine's Day. Now, this could be my own opinion. You could have a completely different opinion. I don't necessarily agree with those lines being included in this day and age.
No, I agree. It's I think you're right. It's a very difficult situation, because I think it'll be interesting to see after sort of the Black Lives Matter and all of that, how artists review their own songs and set lists, because I think it's probably the wake-up call that was needed to sort of force them to look at their set and go and analyze where is the line and what crosses the line, because that line has changed significantly even in the last probably 10 years. So it's constantly changing, and so they have to constantly evolve. But then they have made a living from pushing the line, and I think people find those sort of things quite funny because they are not expecting it. And I think that's where the comedy aspect is, if you know what I mean.
I think Tom Lehrer needs a big shout now, as he was a huge pioneer of musical comedy. I think he was one of the first major musical comedians, and one of the first songs he wrote was called "I Want to Go Back to Dixie," and he sings it with a strong Southern accent. And it is about slave trading, and it's talking about, and it gives reference to the KKK, and it talks about putting white sheets on, I want to put my white sheet on again. Now I know he's given up musical comedy now. He's 90 odd, so and
so fair enough.
he retired from music in the 90s, which was his own decision, and that's fair enough. But I know that he stopped singing that song after a certain period of time. Now I personally don't think that was because he was overplaying the song. I think he probably looked at the song, because I think the song was released in the late 50s, early 60s, and he was still playing in the 70s.
Yeah.
But I think he probably looked at the times and probably thought this song is in poor taste. And personally, I would like more musical comedians to sit down, look at their lyrics, and say, this doesn't fit with the times. And I know Dilly King did that, has done that before, because I have openly requested a song in which he says, if I've got to come back a second time, I'd rather be a kangaroo. And she said, and this was only a few years ago, and she said, I cannot sing that because it doesn't fit with the times anymore. Now they were singing that in the 80s and the 90s, and there must have been a shift that they must have recognised
Yeah.
So clearly, we can't sing this anymore. And
Yeah.
it's not down to the soprano who's with them. I know that plays a part in some of the songs that they sing, because there are some songs that Marilyn Cutts used to sing, or Denise Warmby, or Izzy Van Randwick, that they used to sing, that Liza wouldn't sing. And that's down to vocal range and vocal style. But I
Yeah.
think they probably sat down and said, I think they sat down with their previous set lists and said, we cannot sing this anymore. We cannot sing this anymore. I'm not aware of any of their songs which mention race.
I was going to say, I don't think Fascinating I either have any reference to race at all. No,
But
I think you're right.
Tim Minchin
Definitely
sings a song
does.
called Prejudice. Prejudice and Context. Prejudice has a very nice little chorus when you get into the main song, which is only a ginger can call another ginger ginger, and that is that's very funny.
Yeah.
But for the first part of the song, it starts off very serious, and he spells out, or he gives you the letters. He says a couple of G's, an R and an E, an I and an N. And I watched a reaction video to Prejudice, and it was
Yeah.
two black guys who looked like they were stoned out of their heads, or at least one of them looked very happy to be there, and looked like he didn't have a clue what was going on. But they picked up that the letters that he gives you actually doesn't only spell ginger. And I'm not going to openly say the word.
Oh, I've worked out the anagram.
Yeah, and people can probably work it out themselves. But they openly picked up on it, and I picked up on it.
Yeah.
Whilst listening to it, and Comte, which again he also played with the orchestra.
Yeah.
He introduces as a new song, and he says this song's called Comte, and it starts off as a nice little swing number. And then it gets very offensive from the start. I don't like Jews, neither should you. I don't like black people. They're ethnically and spiritually poor, that's a fact. And he lists various races and religions that you think, how does he get away with that? And then he reaches the end of the song and he says, oh, I realise I've had half of the lyrics covered over. So he sings the song again. But even then, it can still be seen as very offensive, because he says, I don't like Jews because they make and distribute kiddie porn. Neither should you. And I don't think that should be sung. I don't even think it should have been sung the first time.
No.
Because
no.
this was only 10 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago, that it was actually sung. And I still think that there's 10 years ago, there was no place.
No.
No place for racism.
But you haven't seen it. I haven't seen him sing it since, as far as I know. I don't think he's sung it. So I think he's probably got the message now. But yeah, it is staggering that he managed to actually get away with that to an extent. I'm sure he had hundreds and thousands of complaints, but I guess that's what musical comedians are used to having.
Our final question is: are streaming services right to remove programs and films, or are musical streaming services right to remove songs that can be seen as racist, or should they put a warning like an explicit warning next to the song, which says this song includes racist or transphobic remarks.
Well, I think we've kind of sort of answered that, really. I think it depends on how far over the line that the various film or series or song has gone. And obviously there's certain songs now that there's no way that they should be allowed to still be on Spotify or iPlayer or Netflix or Amazon. But then there's others that you might sort of look at and say, well, you know, it's close to the line, but actually it might be better just to put a warning and say,
Yeah.
I think it's a matter of judging them against each other and trying to work out, based on today's society, whether it's appropriate. And if it's close to the line that there's a fear that it could cause some upset, then you just put a warning at the start to deter people from watching it.
And there is one film that is getting a lot of time in the limelight after Little Britain and Come Fly With Me and The Legal Gentleman have been removed, being White Chicks. I don't know if you've heard of the film.
I haven't.
But basically, it's two black cops, and they go undercover, and they pretend to be two white blonde girls. And they have masks. They have white girl masks, and their hands become white and all of this. And white people are saying, in light of Little Britain and Come Fly With Me and League of Gentlemen being classed as racist, why isn't White Chicks being classed as offensive? Because it is black people dressing up and pretending to be white people for comedy.
I think it's only a matter of time before a lot of these things are looked at and a decision is made about whether they should still be available to watch or not. I think we're going to see a lot more in the next weeks and months that are taken down. And I think it's a positive thing, to be honest, in certain aspects. There's obviously some that are overanalyzed, and that could probably still pass as being okay, but it's difficult to judge, as I say, where that line is at times.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing your opinion.
I think we're done. That went very deep, very quickly, but I think that's what it's all about at the moment. There's a lot of controversial topics and a lot of deep conversations to be had.
And this is what to expect. This is what to expect from our podcast. Although we are known for being very comical together, we both share very similar opinions. There are times that we might clash on opinions. That will be very interesting.
Well, these kind of issues at the moment are very divisive, and as I've found out by talking to a lot of my friends, there's some people who completely disagree with what I'm saying, and others that support me, and you can't quite tell where people are going to sit on it, because these are the kind of issues at the moment where people have very, very fixed opinions on things. So it could get interesting.
And next week our topic is it's okay not to be okay. So next week, for anybody who watched and enjoyed this week's and is eager
and for some reason is mad enough to tune in next week,
eager for the next installment. Next week we will be looking at mental health, and mental health during lockdown, especially, and mental health in general, and how lockdown has affected both of us. because
Yeah.
it's affected us in various ways, and I'm sure
In
it's
more
affected,
ways than you can ever imagine.
and I'm sure it's affected lots of the viewers as well. So I'm looking forward to sharing some
I'm
of that.
sure there'll be another, at the rate these news stories are breaking at the moment, I'm sure there'll be another 3 incidents that we need to talk about next week.
Yes, indeed. If you have enjoyed the podcast, please comment, please give a like, please leave your opinions. If you don't agree with us, it's okay to be wrong.
Everyone is entitled to their own opinions.
Everybody is entitled to their own opinion. But we look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you very much, Harry.